Hendrick Motorsports entered the 2015 Daytona 500 as the Goliaths. No surprise there. They boasted the best superspeedway roster in NASCAR with not one, not two, but three different drivers with multiple Daytona 500 victories. They had a large budget to make sure their teams were at the forefront of innovation. Hendrick Motorsports had adapted well to the Gen 6 car, winning the first two Daytona 500s with this car and three of the first four Daytona Gen 6 races.
Hey, that's pretty good.
In 2015, they looked to make even more history with the most dominant overall team performance in Daytona 500 history. Any of its four cars had the speed and the talent behind the wheel to win a 9th Daytona 500 for Rick Hendrick. Considering all of that, it was stunning to not see a Hendrick Chevy SS in victory lane after 200 laps of racing. NRF Productions presents the 2025 premiere, Hendrick's dominant Daytona 500 loss. So 2015 was a thrilling time to be a superfan of NASCAR powerhouse Hendrick Motorsports. Four-time series champion Jeff Gordon was in for a milestone year. The storybook Cup Series career of Jeff Gordon was reaching its final chapter. 2015 was a 9-month cross-country retirement tour. It would be filled with gifts and even throwback paint schemes that made the fans against Gordon ask the tough questions.
What are you, gay?
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
Anyways, entering his final season, there was a lot of optimism within Jeff Gordon's team and Jeff Gordon's fans that the drive for 5 was still alive. Sure, that hunger for a 5th championship nearly got extinguished in 2014. Well, that was before at Texas he was bucked out of the middle groove and eventually out of the championship 4. Regardless, Jeff Gordon won his most races in a single season since 2007. There was no question that Jeff Gordon in his 24 Ever Tour had a great chance to ride off into the sunset as a NASCAR champion. So for Jeff Gordon, the easiest part of his 2015 retirement tour was Daytona 500 qualifying. This was the easiest day as all he had to do was hold it wide open and let the team have their moment. Although, for the first time ever, NASCAR would have group qualifying for the Daytona 500.
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.
In a testament of fighting and digging, the chippy number 24 team that never gave up clinched the pole for the Daytona 500. Jeff Gordon officially put up the 5th fastest lap in Daytona 500 qualifying history. For the NASCAR legend, he was on the right track to becoming the first driver since Bobby Allison in 1988 to win the Daytona 500 in his final start. To his outside on the front row would be the car he owned and the driver he handpicked to drive the Lowe's 48. All Jimmie Johnson did is win, win, win no matter what. Got championships on his mind, he could never get enough.
Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one.
Jimmie Johnson was arguably the greatest sports athlete in the 2010s, not named
LeBron James.
However, for Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus, their theme song for 2014 was Hangover by Psy. Statistically, it was a subpar season for a duo that had won the championship in 6 of their 13 seasons together. For just the 3rd time in 9 years, there were no parties to distract Team 48 from their goal: make NASCAR history. Jimmie Johnson looked to kick off his bid for a 7th championship by winning his 3rd Daytona 500. His speed week saw him not only qualify 2nd, but also, without the help of his teammates, win his Budweiser duel. The 48 looked to bounce back and make the competition believe that they've got a golden horseshoe stuck up their ass. Rounding out NASCAR's original Big Three was the defending Daytona 500 champion Dale Earnhardt Jr. Junior Nation had a lot to celebrate in 2014. Jr. tripled his win count at Hendrick Motorsports and had his first multi-win season since 2004. This was the season where Dale Earnhardt Jr. finally crossed that bridge to become a Hendrick driver in spirit. Although in 2015, he would face a unique set of challenges in his Cup Series career. Steve Letarte was off to the NBC booth, not just to provide insight, but also get into a weekly screaming match with both Rick Allen and Jeff Burton. Greg Ives would now have the hardest job in all of racing, being the crew chief for NASCAR's most popular driver. Despite the challenges of working with a new crew chief, Dale Earnhardt Jr. wouldn't skip a beat in his Daytona 500 defense. Even as his number 88 did not meet the minimum height rule and had to start at the rear of the field, Earnhardt did typical Earnhardt things. Dale Earnhardt Jr. had arguably the best race car in Daytona Beach, Florida. His car was fast in single car runs and fast in race conditions. Plus, let's not ignore the obvious. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is an incredible super speedway racer. I mean, it's in his blood. But especially since he had joined Hendrick Motorsports, Dale Earnhardt Jr. put up elite numbers in every Daytona 500, just forget about 2009. With what was brewing in the 2015 Speed Weeks, you couldn't help as a Junior fan to just sit there and scream, "Dale, yeah!" Then we've got Kasey Kahne, the black sheep of the HMS stable. It was easy for him to want to become a renegade after the 2014 season. While all three of his teammates won multiple races and crown jewel events, Kahne barely made the playoffs. In fact, he was below the cut line before he won a clutch race at Atlanta to finally outduel the man that haunted his sweet dreams, Matt Kenseth. He was basically Squidward watching his three teammates run around having fun. But in 2015, it was time for Kasey Kahne to make a move and maybe even break the rules, especially with a new crew chief in Keith Rodden.
Keith, watch out for Keith.
Despite all of the disappointment, all it takes is one marquee win like Daytona to launch your career into legendary status. Kasey Kahne looked to turn heads with a new black and blue Farmer Chevy SS, which might be white and gold depending on how you looked at it. Hendrick Motorsports was ready to tackle the Daytona 500 for the final time as a super team. Being a part of Hendrick Motorsports, whether you were a driver or a team, is legendary. Another thing that's legendary is becoming a member of the Digital Gas House Patreon. For $5 a month, you can have your name at the end of every NRF Productions and Fuel Cell full video, or for $10 a month, you can still have your name at the end of every video, but also get early access to NRF Productions and Fuel Cell full videos, scripts, and be a higher priority for potential future giveaways. There are a lot of perks to becoming a member of the Gas House Gang, and if you want to join, the link is in the description below. So as 43 competitors roared across the start-finish line in their race cars, the 2015 Daytona 500 began the same way that the 1997 Daytona 500 ended. The 24 in the lead with his teammates in tow. Jimmie Johnson took the lead on lap 2, but he would hand it right back to his boss. The 48 brushed the wall and would fade into the eye of the hornet's nest. He would be saved by Landon Castle and the Circle Sport team that would run for the hills after blowing a motor, bringing out the race's first caution on lap 20. Now it was time for some of the highest paid engineers in the world to solve their drivers' problems. Some adjustments were made and all 4 Hendrick cars would exit pit road in the top 10. On the next green flag run, the 88 wanted to feel out if his adjustments were working. So in this situation, Jeff Gordon was like,
I got you, homie.
In the middle of this run, he chose to be a good team player and run the bottom lane to help his teammate. For Dale Jr. and Greg Ives, they were progressing on the 88 setup as the car wasn't as tight as it once was. Then on lap 41, a former winner for Hendrick Motorsports at the Daytona International Speedway would be defeated in the Daytona 500 for the final time, leading into the next green flag run, which would show just how dominant Hendrick Motorsports was. Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Kasey Kahne were all in the top 5, with Jimmie Johnson working his way back into the top 10. They did all of this without changing lefts. In fact, the 24, 48, and the 88 ran the first 87 laps of the race on the same set of left side tires. Unfortunately, on this pit stop for Jimmie Johnson, he would be hit with an over-the-wall too soon penalty. Believe it or not, but this infraction still wasn't the most atrocious thing about this pit stop.
Question for you. What are those?
Jimmie Johnson would need to serve a penalty for being over the wall too soon, although it could have arguably been for the shoes. This would put a cobalt wrench into their plans to want to stay up front all day long. Meanwhile, teammate and boss Jeff Gordon was fulfilling that objective for his 24 team. If you wanted to dominate a super speedway race, there was one thing you needed to do.
Gotta go fast. Gotta go fast. Gotta go fast, too fast, too fast, too fast, too fast.
For Jeff Gordon, his paint scheme looked the part as his black and maroon Chevy SS was as scorching hot as his Exalta cars. However, you also needed a car that could handle well in any type of air. The 24 car clearly had both the speed and the great handling. Because of that, Jeff Gordon was able to achieve a personal milestone. For the first time in his Daytona 500 career, Jeff Gordon would lead the most laps. While it did symbolize strength, you could argue that this wasn't a blessing but rather a curse. In 6 of the last 7 Daytona 500s, the eventual winner didn't lead until halfway. Even more daunting was that the last driver to win a Daytona 500 by leading the halfway lap was Davey Allison in 1992. Jeff Gordon would have to go out onto that racetrack and defy both numbers and probability if he wanted to rewrite a record previously set by the Allisons. Not only winning his final Daytona 500, but to have the entire world ask,
"What in the AARP is going on out here?"
A debris caution wouldn't just allow the 24, 88, and the 5 to make critical adjustments to get even better. This was a huge break for the number 48. In this next run, Jimmie Johnson would gradually work himself up through the pack, whereas his teammate and boss Jeff Gordon would fade. During this run, the pendulum swung from the 24 to the 88 as Dale Earnhardt Jr. was getting dialed in. On lap 114, Dale Earnhardt Jr. made an aggressive move and was met with the roar of the crowd. Finally, all was right in the NASCAR world. Dale Earnhardt Jr. had the lead for the first time all afternoon. The stakes were high as there was a lot on the line for Dale Earnhardt Jr. if he were to win the 2015 Daytona 500. Sitting at a combined 49 victories, a win by Dale Jr. today would make it 50 wins for the Earnhardt family at Daytona. Hendrick Motorsports was putting on a super speedway masterclass and had the best cars in Daytona. However, every superhero has its kryptonite. For HMS, possibly their kryptonite was Joey Logano. While all 4 Hendrick cars found themselves in the top 6, the 22 was able to take the lead back from the 88. If Joey Logano didn't suffer the same fate as teammate Brad Keselowski and alliance partner Ryan Blaney, he was the greatest challenge to spoil the Hendrick party. The blown motor of the two caused a split strategy between the Hendrick Motorsports drivers. Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jimmie Johnson elected to take the track position. As for Kasey Kahne and Jeff Gordon, they elected to take 4.5 seconds of fuel. Perhaps for different motives. Jeff Gordon was going off of prior racing knowledge, banking on this being like the 2005 Daytona 500. This was the first ever Daytona 500 to go to overtime. Ironically, it was Jeff Gordon holding off at the time defending Daytona 500 champion Dale Earnhardt Jr. for the win. For Kasey Kahne, well, he was sponsored by an insurance company.
We are farmers, bum 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 bum.
He would make sure that the farmer's insurance car was covered for whatever mayhem was going to come their way in the important stretch of the race. The intensity was about to shift into high gear as shown by Jeff Gordon radioing back to his team.
It's gonna get wild now, so here's what we came for.
On the restart, Hendrick Motorsports was the most daring team, willing to make some of the most aggressive moves on the racetrack to take control of the Daytona 500. Dale Earnhardt Jr. made a bold 3-wide move. Jeff Gordon was instructed by Alan Gustafson to put the pressure on guys that weren't assured to make it to the end on fuel. I'm sure Joey Logano at this moment understood the meaning of never meet your heroes. Meanwhile, for the lead, Jimmie Johnson completed the comeback with an overly aggressive side draft on Carl Edwards. The 2015 Hendrick Motorsports team was racing like Jeff Gordon in the closing laps of the 1999 Daytona 500. They refused to lose, but they needed to put this race out of reach for their rivals. In addition to Joey Logano, defending series champion Kevin Harvick, great superspeedway racer Denny Hamlin, as well as Clint Bowyer were worthy opponents to take down the mighty Hendrick Motorsports. With under 15 laps to go in the Daytona 500, the drivers knew it was going down for real in Flo Rida. This created an exceptional showcase of human ability with drivers going 3x3x3 in the pack. While it was great optically on TV, this was the thing that would hurt Hendrick Motorsports' chances to win the race. Despite having the strength in numbers, there was little maneuverability. Because of that, the Hendrick cars couldn't align together to outpower the 4, the 11, the 15, and the 22. By the time the 24, the 5, and the 88 found each other, it was too late. With 3 laps to go, Jimmie Johnson was fending for himself in third, ready to seize the moment if the opportunity presented itself. Justin Allgaier's wreck mid-pack proved to be the necessary stress reliever that every driver and crew chief needed, especially after going 3 wide at 200 miles per hour for multiple laps with little room for error. Now the Hendrick Motorsports drivers could strategize their attack for NASCAR overtime. So Hendrick Motorsports still had 4 cars in the top 10, however, it would be a tall order to hijack the race out of the 11 and the 22's hands. On the final restart, Jimmie Johnson would struggle on the bottom while Jeff Gordon and Kasey Kahne remained mid-pack. Hendrick's last hope was the defending Daytona 500 champion Dale Earnhardt Jr. By working with Kevin Harvick, the two could pass the 22 on the last lap and settle the 500 amongst themselves. However, what could have happened and what should have happened on that final lap of the 2015 Daytona 500 will be debated until the end of time. Austin Dillon would accidentally avenge Dale Earnhardt for the 1997 Daytona 500 by wrecking Jeff Gordon off of turn 2. Further proving that Austin Dillon is the imitator. Jeff Gordon, who spent a whopping 98.5% of the laps in the top 15, would be credited with a 33rd place finish. The other Hendrick Motorsports drivers would all place inside the top 10, but none of them would hoist the Hurley J. Earl Trophy in Daytona 500 Victory Lane.
Joey Logano wins the Daytona 500. Roger Penske's going to have to scramble down to Victory Lane to help celebrate. And the Fords may not have been fast all week, but they were fast when it counted.
So Rick Hendrick walked out of the Daytona International Speedway heartbroken, devastated. There would be no Jeff Gordon final hurrah in the Daytona 500, nor would Dale Earnhardt Jr. or Jimmie Johnson win their 3rd Daytona 500s, or even Kasey Kahne finally propelling his career into the spotlight. Instead, he got to witness a generational smoke show by Smokin Joe as the winner of the 2015 Daytona 500. It makes it even worse as a car owner when you see a car that wasn't as great as yours go out there and win the race. The best cars of this Daytona 500 were hands down the 88, the 48, and the 24 in that order. Dale Earnhardt Jr. could slice through the pack like a fruit ninja. Jimmie Johnson was like a boomerang, fighting his way back to the front after a less than perfect race ruined their track position. Jeff Gordon had a fast car and spent all but 3 laps inside the top 15. Heck, even Kasey Kahne ran inside the top 10 for most of this race and had the second most green flag passes. Hendrick Motorsports dominated the 2015 Daytona 500 with the fastest cars, the best handling cars, and arguably the best drivers out there that could make the most aggressive moves to remain up front. However, they lost this race because of race circumstances and not being able to orchestrate a strategy to where they controlled their own destiny. Unfortunately, this loss would ignite a Daytona 500 dark ages for the organization. Over the next decade, Hendrick Motorsports lost their speed outside of the Hendrick Motorsports Pole Qualifying Invitational. In the race themselves, their cars struggled with handling, namely in the 2016 Daytona 500. It would take Hendrick Motorsports another 10 years to win another Daytona 500. The true irony of this race was that it was the Ford, specifically Team Penske's Joey Logano, that dominated this race. William Byron was just the driver that had everything go right on that final restart. In 2015, Hendrick Motorsports was truly elite in the Daytona 500, but because they weren't able to drown themselves in confetti, this goes down as one of the most dominant team losses in Daytona 500 history. If you enjoyed this video, there's going to be plenty of other full-tank Daytona 500 content on this channel gearing up for the big race. Other than that, this is Nathan for Digital Gas House. Life's a beach, and then you drive.